Hello. All right. So, got a lot to say. I'm going to be moving pretty fast. Hello and welcome to Do You See What I'm Saying? The Design of Owlchemy Labs Subtitle System. As a heads up, this talk will feature some brightly colored static images and some animated GIFs. If you are sensitive to these things, please take a moment to do what you need to ensure your comfort and safety. All right, let's begin. So, my name is Peter Galbraith. I'm the Senior Accessibility Engineer and Cyber Pun King at Owlchemy Labs. I have pale skin and long blonde facial hair, and I'm wearing a black shirt. My pronouns are he, him. As for Owlchemy Labs, we are a VR game studio headquartered in Austin, Texas. But since 2020, we have permanently transitioned to having a fully remote team. Our most recently released game is Cosmonious High. But if you've been in VR for a while, you might be more familiar with our other games, Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator. In fact, Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator have each sold over 1 million copies, making Owlchemy the first VR studio with multiple platinum VR exclusive titles. And as of a little over a week ago, those two games have also been ported to the Apple Vision Pro and had new hand tracking updates released on the MetaQuest platform. And I have been fortunate enough to have worked on the accessibility features in all of these games. And I'm excited to talk to you about that work today. Now, again, I have a lot I want to cover in this talk, so I'm going to get right into it. I'm also going to mount this because it'll help my hand. Starting with the obvious, why redesign subtitles? Well, because the experience of sitting in front of a screen and the experience of being immersed in the world are inherently different from each other. But what makes them so different? Why wouldn't traditional subtitles work? Why redesign something that has worked for over a century? Well, the first thing to know is that this isn't a complete redesign. Traditional subtitles have been around for many years and have become a staple in all sorts of digital media. They're so widely used and accepted that it would be ridiculous if I was to throw them out entirely and start over from scratch. So instead, I took a critical look at existing subtitles in movies, TV, and games to learn how subtitles have been addressing people's needs. And what I found was that there were many good practices that translate well to the VR medium. But I also found that there were aspects of traditional subtitles that didn't translate well to VR. For example, you don't necessarily have control of where the camera is pointing, and you don't have necessarily the same dedicated screen space that you would in a traditional flat screen. But it was clear that to make subtitles for VR that were just as comprehensive in handling people's needs as traditional subtitles were, we were going to have to innovate. So now, to satisfy my own perfectionism, I want to quickly point out that it is important to pay attention to all of these things when you're working on your own subtitle system. And there are plenty of resources that can help you with the aspects that both mediums have in common. But in the limited time I have today, I'll be focusing on the challenges that are unique to XR. So what are those unique challenges, and how did we go about designing for the medium? The first step was recognizing that we'd have to place the subtitles in the virtual world rather than on it. When viewing subtitles on a 2D screen, your eyes are able to focus on the position of the screen in the real world, and in order to read the text. But our eyes have trouble focusing on objects that are only a few millimeters in front of them. So we knew right away that we couldn't simply slap subtitles on top of the screen anymore. They were going to have to exist in a location in the virtual space where your eyes could actually focus enough to read them. But Placing subtitles in the world comes with more challenges and questions, with the most obvious being, where do you place them? It's a deceptively simple question, and we tried a variety of position possibilities. What we found through our testing and experimentation was that the best place to place the best place to place subtitles was at the depth of the speaker. Your eyes are muscles, and like any other muscle, they get tired from repeated use. By placing the subtitles at the same depth as the speaker, we made it easier to look between the text and the speaker without needing to refocus your eyes. This was important to us because communication is as much about the verbal content as it is the body language and gestures. And reducing eye fatigue is also simply a great way to make your experience more comfortable. We also chose to position our subtitles above the characters' heads so that the text would be less likely to obscure valuable visuals, such as gestures that the speaker may make or other objects in between the user and the speaker. In this position, subtitles will mostly end up over less critical background elements, such as the sky or blank walls. And in the rare events where we anticipate that the subtitles could cover important content, we gave the developers the ability to author and offset and place the subtitles in other positions around the speaker. But position isn't the only thing that can affect readability. Size also plays an important role. To help account for this, we scale subtitles based on how far away the text is from the user. The further away the user is, the larger the subtitles actually are. Importantly, however, the size of the text in the user's vision appears to remain the same and constant to them, regardless of how far away the text is. And because the text size will appear to remain constant to users, it becomes possible to offer traditional subtitle size options to help keep the text large and readable without requiring the user to lean in to see better. So now that the text is large and at a comfortable viewing distance, what do we do if the user is looking somewhere other than at the speaker? We don't want deaf and hard of hearing users missing out on content, but simply locking an object to a user's head has been known for a while to cause motion sickness, and we don't want that either. So what can we do? Well, the answer we found is to make subtitles lag behind the player's movements instead of being directly tied to them. This reduces motion sickness while also ensuring that no matter where the player is looking, they're not missing out on crucial audio information. There is one notable exception to this that we found, though. Since motion sickness is often the result of what your eyes see mismatching with what your inner ear is telling you about gravity, it is important that subtitles remain upright relative to the world to help provide that stability. Having subtitles lag behind the pitch and yaw of the head is fine, but they shouldn't follow the head's roll. Otherwise, all the same things about depth, positioning, and size that I just went over in the previous slides remains the same. Additionally, we do some signaling to help the player identify the speaker more easily. There are obvious ones like indicating who the speaker is with an icon or name and having a small arrow that points toward where the speaker is. But a more subtle aspect is that we slightly offset the speech box in the direction of the speaker, and we also snap it to the speaker's location when the user's head is nearly looking at the speaker. Though not strictly necessary, these changes help us direct the user to look toward and more easily identify the source of the audio. Finally, we come to the biggest issue with placing subtitles in the world: occlusion. And you may think the solution to this would simply be to have subtitles render on top of everything else if they would be hidden by objects in the world. But in practice, this leads to a weird mismatch in your brain. On the one hand, your eyes are telling you that the subtitles are in front of everything. But for people with stereo vision, stereo convergence will tell the brain that the subtitles should be behind the objects in the environment. So to account for this mismatch, we use brightness and importantly opacity to help keep the text legible at all times while also retaining a sense of depth. When the subtitles would be hidden behind an object, instead of hiding them, we slightly increase the transparency and add a subtle glow, which gives the illusion that they are being projected from behind the object. It's the same sort of feeling as seeing a light come from behind wax paper. We also keep an amount of transparency active even when the subtitles aren't obscured by the rest of the environment. Having the subtitles remain in the center of the user's vision is important since the subtitles loosely follow the user's head. And it would be impossible for the user to move their head to look more directly at the subtitles, because when they move their head, the subtitles will move with them. So it's important to keep the subtitles in the center of the user's vision so that we can reduce that eye strain and make subtitles more accessible to people with reduced fields of view. But keeping some transparency allows us to keep the subtitles more centrally located without being overly intrusive and completely blocking other visual content. And so with all of that, you should now have a pretty good idea of why we adopted the designs we did for subtitles. But there are still some other considerations that could help improve people's experiences with subtitles in VR. The first is to consider external viewers, by which I mean the people outside the headset that may be observing. That could be people in a Twitch stream watching someone playing, or friends and family watching you play on the computer. And so when you're playing our games on PC, VR players can enable a mode that shows a camera with smooth motion to external viewers that is different from what the player sees. This makes the experience a bit more comfortable in terms of motion sickness to those external players. And in addition to that, we also provide a more traditional subtitle view. Just as traditional subtitles aren't necessarily the best choice for VR subtitles aren't necessarily the best choice for viewing on a traditional screen. And as this group probably already knows, accessibility isn't a one-size-fits-all thing. And VR subtitles are no different in that regard. Even though what we've done with our subtitles has proven helpful for the vast majority of our players, everyone has different needs, and I'm not foolish enough to think that we've developed a solution that works perfectly for everyone. So with that in mind, it's important to allow users to customize their experience to best suit their needs. There are some traditional subtitle display options that you can provide to your users, such as the size of subtitles, like I mentioned earlier, the color and opacity of the text and background, and the font. There are also some options that are unique to VR subtitles that you could add as well. For example, the follow speed or strength when the subtitles are following your head. While some people may feel uncomfortable when objects follow their motions one-to-one, others might like it a little tighter, or conversely, they might want more lag to really help separate themselves from that following thing that can cause motion sickness. Another thing would be the angle at which subtitles will snap or unsnap from a subject. Some people may not want the subtitles to follow them at all. Some people may be okay with having the subtitles just be constantly above the subject. And another thing is where the subtitles are positioned in the player's view. I mentioned that it is nice to have the subtitles centrally located because it causes less eye strain. But for some people, they might want it shifted down just a little bit or up just a little bit, just to give them that more central space to see things and not have it obscure as much. Similarly to how some players prefer the reduced noise that comes with having opaque subtitles when they are in front of objects, it's also worthwhile to let players customize how much the subtitles show up on top of world elements that are between the player and the subtitles. And then, there's always the option that you may have innovated designs that are different from what we have here, and you may have additional options. I encourage options. But regardless of what options you are able to offer, I implore everyone to use sensible defaults that prioritize making as many users' experience as accessible and comfortable as possible. Finally, it's important that you innovate with care. When I started looking into VR subtitles, I knew something had to change. What existed clearly wasn't the best thing for our game. We could do better. But to do so, we needed to consider what our experience was like and what our players needed. It is possible that other ideas and implementations may be better suited to your app or game or experience. Maybe your game would be better suited to having subtitles come from the player's wrist, like my initial subtitle prototype. That design missed a few things that we valued, but maybe with the right context or a bit more development, it could work well. Or maybe you have your own ideas on how to improve the designs presented here today. Whatever the case, I encourage you to not take this talk as doctrine and instead critically think about each problem we addressed with our designs. If our designs work for your users, that's great, and we're happy to have saved you that R&D time. But if not, consider what your users need and how you could improve the experience for all of them. And if after testing with members of the disabled community, you realize that you have something good, share your results so that we can all help more players. So now let me leave you with some final thoughts. We are still in the early days of VR. Innovation in this space is still happening, and every game or app has the potential and has a high potential to be someone's first. And if on that first experience, we make someone feel ill or uncomfortable or unwelcome, they may never try VR again. We only get one chance at a first impression, so let's all make sure that it's at least not a bad experience. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Peter. We have one question from Zoom for you. Are a majority of the VR subtitle features you worked on or developed completely reliant on head tracking? What are the effects on the subtitle experience of not having the head tracking ability available on the use hardware or HMD?
So I think I understand the question, so let me hopefully get this right. We do use a lot of head tracking stuff because that is the nature of our experiences. They are based on players' movement, and they're turning their heads and moving laterally through the space. So there is a reliance on that. But again, with things like options, you could reduce the motion needed by either locking the subtitles to the characters, the speakers in the environment, or other places, and not having to deal with that.
Awesome. And we have maybe time for one question from the audience here. I see one on the right there. Yeah, we'll repeat it for Zoom here.
Readability and are you trying to develop for screen space or world space for maximum readability and responsiveness? And what has been the difficulties with that for captioning in a 3D environment?
That's a big question, and I'm going to answer as fast as I can to get y'all out to the break. We do consider the user's sort of screen space. It's not actually screen space in this case, but we do take into account the FOV that you will have in the headset for making sure that things fit inside of that FOV comfortably. But we do also design for world space because that's where the implementation actually happens. And going back to that slide of showing the subtitle resizing, there you could see how we're handling subtitle resizing in that world space, but still considering the screen space by leaving it the same size to the player's vision.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. A hand for Peter.